Hi, everyone. Welcome to the November Lunch and Learn series. I am Laura Tucker. I'm the Early College Coordinator at SEL. I am currently at a school visit, and they have generously donated their storage room in their library. So that's where I am Zooming from right now, but it's really great to have you join us live today, or if you're watching this recorded, I'm glad that we were able to connect. So let's go ahead and get started. I thank you for coming. I should have edited my slide better. This is November, not September, but I do have the dates correct on the slide. Today's November 2nd, and our topic today is the Asvab Career Exploration Program. We have Dr. Granberry joining us. Next week, we have a representative from the College Board. This will be a two-part series. The College Board series will be a two-part series. Next week, he's going to talk about just some resources for counselors in regards to the March exam. And then the January session, he said, is going to be nuts and bolts and talking about some of the logistics of getting the exam set up and administered in your school. So I think that is going to be a really great counselor conversation. November 16th, we've got a panel of administrators and mental health professionals that are going to talk about the student behavior and some of what they're seeing as students have re-entered school after COVID, and some of the maturity delays and student behavior challenges that we are seeing. So I'm also looking forward to that one. November 23rd, November 30th, we're taking off Thanksgiving and all of the busy times that you guys are experiencing. So we are not going to host on those two dates. So that being said, if it's your first time joining, we meet Tuesdays from noon to 1 Eastern Standard Time. We try to log off promptly at 1 o'clock so that you know when you will be available for your next task. Usually it's a presentation by a topic expert. You are welcome to ask questions in the chat. You are welcome to unmute. You're welcome to show your screen. Whatever your comfort level is today, we will meet you where you are. So without taking any more time, I will pass the torch to Dr. Granberry to start our conversation about Asvab and the Career Exploration Program. All right, Dr. Granberry, they're all yours.
First, I want to say good afternoon to everyone. Uh, I'm not sure who all is actually viewing this or participating in this particular process, but I look forward to this particular session. I'm sure that I probably have come in contact with many of you that is a part of this particular process. I just want to highlight a couple of things as we move forward as far as the Asvab Career Exploration Program in high schools here in the state of Indiana. Going forward, I just want to say that because of the schools and the professionals that we have in the many schools that we actually service, I have about 485 high schools uh, in the state, and I have about four counties of schools over in the state of Illinois that we service. Um, Indiana right now is the highest ASVAB testing state in the country. And so, up to date right now, as we speak, since the start of the school year, we have tested over 200, no, not, we have tested about 23,000 students over the last couple of months. We anticipate testing close to 50,000 students by the end of the school year. So I just want to just highlight a couple of things about the ASVAB Career Exploration Program. Like I often state many times, that little acronym gives me a lot of problems here in the state, simply because of the meaning of the acronym itself. The acronym actually means Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. So, technically speaking, our government administer an ASVAB to men and women going into the armed services in order to determine if that person was in the armed services, what type of job, occupation, or career would they qualify for in the armed services? I take a few moments to explain that because what most people do not understand is that there are two ASVAB programs. And oftentimes I tell people, here's how you would distinguish which program you're participating in. Most of you have recruiters that come in and out of your particular school. If one of those recruiters was to take one of your students and place them in his or her car and drive them to Indianapolis to the military entrance processing station, or if you're in northern Indiana, they drive them to Chicago military entrance processing station for the purpose of taking the ASVAB test, then you would know that that particular person is participating in the ASVAB program for enlistment into the armed services consideration. Now, that's ASVAB number one. ASVAB number two is the ASVAB Career Exploration Program in the high schools. The ASVAB program in the high school, the purpose of that program is for career exploration. That's our main focus, main reason for testing in the high school is for career exploration. Sometime within the next couple of months, I will send out to all of our schools, and I probably will post it on Counselor Talk. On the ASVAB reservation form, box 11 asks every student that takes the ASVAB test, when they walk across that stage out of high school, what do they plan on doing? Do they plan on going to a 4-year college or a 2-year college or a vocational school? Do they plan on going to work? Do they plan on going to the military? And then there's a unknown or undecided. Well, we have a growing interest in that undecided box. That little piece of the pie is getting larger and larger as we move from year to year. And so that is where our concern is at because we are dealing with juniors, and seniors getting ready to walk across that stage out of high school, and they do not have a clue in their mind what direction to go as far as directions or occupation. So the ASVAB program in the high school is administered in the high schools to provide you, the counselor, the schools, a tool, a second to none tool that can assist you in your particular responsibility and duty to provide career direction for your students. So the ASVAB, you have the ASVAB for enlistment into the armed services consideration, and you have the ASVAB career exploration program in high schools. Now, since there are two separate programs, I want to talk about some of the facts and the myth and the truth about the ASVAB CEP. The ASVAB, here are some of the questions, comments that I often hear. Sometimes a council might say the ASVAB is only for kids who plan to enlist in the military, or most of my students are college bound. They won't benefit from participating in the ASVAB CEP. Or sometimes a council might say Ms. Granberry, as soon as my students take the ASVAB test, they will be bombarded with phone calls from the military recruiters. Or I just don't have the classroom hours to devote to giving the test. So there are many reasons when it comes to the ASVAB that people have. Um, as you know, the ASVAB is a graduation pathway here in the state of Indiana. Now we worked real hard back in 2000. We worked real hard back in 2017 to make that happen. And I was fortunate to be a part of that particular process because during those deliberations, the state wanted to make that AFQT score a 50. And you and I both, if you're familiar with the ASVAB, you and I both realized that if the state had made that cut score 50 for the AFQT, then that would have placed many, many students at a disadvantage uh, because very few students score a 50 AFQT score. So the graduation for the graduation pathway, the AFQT score is 31. That is the entry level score into any of the armed services. Granted, some of the service requires a little higher AFQT score, but technically a 31 will simply get a person in the door. What we know is that if a person score at least a 31 AFQT score, then we know that that person possessed the basic math and English skills to function and operate in thousands of occupations all across the board in the armed services. So as I move forward here, if you have specific questions, then just indicate that I'm not as high tech as some of you with these devices and all of that, but I will be able to entertain some of your questions. I'm trying to highlight as many anticipated questions that I come in contact with on a regular basis. So let me just start out by saying um, there are so many different there's so many different directions that we can go when it comes to the ASVAB CEP. But I would just stick with the state of Indiana. I just stick with the basics of the focus and the direction that we are going here in the state. One, let's talk about testing in the high schools. In the high schools, as the ASVAB is a very simple test process. Our program provides everything that is needed for testing down to the pencil and scratch paper. Right now, because we're in the midst of a pandemic, I have requested that the schools provide pencils for the testing of their students. And the reason being, we replicate some of the items that we use on a daily basis. For example, like pencils. I have been on the road for the last couple of weeks. And usually, when I go out to a particular school, if a school is testing 300, 400, 500 plus students, that will always involve someone from my particular staff. While I'm at this point, those individuals that come into your school to administer the ASVAB, those are paid test administrators. So when we send out paid test administrators to your school to administer the test, I am up under the assumption that those paid test administrators are carrying out and following the protocol as far as test administration is concerned. Testing in your school is a 3 hour process. That includes from start to finish. That includes filling out the answer sheets and all everything within a 3 hour window. So if that is not happening in your school, I need to know about it. So those are paid test administrators. So in the process of testing in the high schools, we provide the test administrator. Now, in the school language, the test administrator is considered the proctor. So we provide the test administrator, which is the person that's going to administer and supervise, oversee the whole test. Then we use the proctors. In our language for proctors, we use the recruiting services to come in to proctor the test. They supervise just to make sure the students not tearing up our test booklet, no one is cheating, and they just doing what they should be doing because that is a real ASVAB test. We will give your students a real AFQT score. That AFQT score that we give those students serve for two purposes. If you have students that's interested in the armed services, that AFQT score, if it's high enough, is good. That student can use that score for 2 years. That score is good for 2 years. So we have the proctors, the recruiters to come in to supervise the test. Just keep in mind the sometimes the proctors, the recruiters do not show up. So, in order for one of my staff members to administer that test, there must be a proctor or someone in that particular testing location with them. We have a 1 to 40 ratio when it comes to proctoring. So, we provide that for you. Here is what the school responsibility in this process is. The school actually submits to us a testing reservation form. I consistently sends out our most current updated reservation form to the schools. I also attach to that process how to complete. I had to wave at the light. I'm sorry. Uh, uh, the sensors in the office here. But you have to, also saying how to complete that reservation form. Right now, we are allowing schools to test once in the fall, once in the spring. And you select, when you look at that reservation form and you select 3 dates, those 3 dates that you select should be within that semester. So uh, you give me a date one, two, three. And the reason I need 3 dates, if you just give me one date, with the volume of schools that we're testing, that date might not even be available. So you give me 3 test dates. After you give me 3 test dates, then like that question that I read before, as soon as my students take the ASVAB, they will be bombarded with phone calls from military recruiters. You, the school, tells me how you want us to deal with the releasing of your students as their results. So you do that by options. There are 8 options. Most of our schools are option 1 through 6. And what option does is simply this. If you are option 1 school, you just simply saying to me, Mr. Granberry, when your people finish processing our results and you send our results to our schools, we have no problems if you release those results to the recruiting command. Now, when we release results to the recruiting command, we don't just release those results to the Army or just the Navy. We release those results to the liaisons of all of those particular services. And the option 1, that's like 7 days. Or you might be in option 3, saying, Mr. Granberry, I don't mind you release them after 90 days or 120 days. Then you have option 6. Many schools, many schools, well, I won't say a lot of schools, but we do have a number of schools that choose option 8. Option 8 means that our office will not release the results of your tests, your students, to any of the armed services. Now, do that prevent your students from pursuing a career or looking at the armed services? No. You might have some students that are interested in looking at the armed services and they have no problems with their scores being released. But if you're option 8 school, we will not release those results. However, you don't have to just have an option 8. If you know there are certain situations where certain students want their information released, then you can give your test administrator the name of those particular students. And when those are processed, then we can manually change that option for those individual students when the results and things are processed. If you are concerned about recruiters calling your students home, then maybe you want to consider option 6. Option 6, we release those results, but we do not release those results with a phone number. Now, keep in mind, regardless of what option that you actually choose, the recruiting station probably have contact information for your student body. I believe the school, I sent out some information about a month ago, a little over a month ago, about what information the schools is kind of mandated that they provide to the recruiting services. So, so as you move through that reservation form, you choose the option uh, of how you want us to release that information. If you do not have that information on that reservation form, then we do not just arbitrarily assign an option. We will contact your school and get that option from your point of contact. So as you move down that reservation form, as you finish that information, then you get to this section um, that is going to have you to illustrate or tell us how you want to test. One of the first thing that we ask is give us your student population. When we ask for your student population, this is not how many students you are testing. This is what's your population for your seniors, your 12th graders, your 11th graders, your 10th graders. Then the second portion of that, we're asking how many students do you plan on testing? Now, let me interject. As you know, like most state tests, we offer, out of courtesy to the school, special accommodation testing. Now, keep in mind with special accommodation testing, Any special accommodation testing is automatically an option 7. Now, I mentioned you have 8 options. Option 7 is not an option for the school to choose. Option 7 is an administrative option. That administrative option is assigned by our office or our system. The administrative option simply means that that particular student scores is invalidated. They are invalid for military consideration. It do not impact the graduation pathway at all, but the invalidation is only for military consideration. So if you have students in your school that you know that may have an interest in going into the armed services, let's say that student is a junior. One strategy that you may want to use is first allow them to take the test utilizing the accommodations to kind of see how they would fare out utilizing accommodations. And if they fare out well, then they will have to take another ASVAB test. So the next time that you offer the ASVAB test, go ahead and place them in a general session. So you have the general sessions, which is without any accommodations. Then you will have the special accommodation sessions. Let me highlight what special accommodation looks like from our standpoint. We will allow schools time and a half for the special accommodations, time and a half. And the manual and the other thing about special accommodations, I do not provide any test administrators for for special accommodation session. The school must provide the test administrator and any additional support in that particular room for special accommodation. I provide you a testing kit and all of that. Also, in your reservation process, any if the school chooses that they want to administer the test themselves, that they can do that. Teachers, administrators, teachers, counselors, you already are familiar with the testing process. There's nothing unique about the ASVAB, administering the ASVAB test. Um, we do have a training video that anyone other than one of our staff that administer the ASVAB test, we ask that you view that video prior to testing. The video just familiarize you with some of the forms that you will have to send when our test administrator shows up at your school. So it's very important that if you plan on testing, let's say, for example, I have some schools, recently, we had schools that were testing 20, 25, 30 different classrooms. So when that happens, then our test score technician and our staff, they have to build individual testing kits for each of those rooms. So it's very important that whoever your coordinator is in setting this up, that they actually articulate on that reservation form or send me a breakdown of how many rooms that is testing, the room number, the teacher in that room, and specifically how many students is in those rooms. Because that kit, when we show up, will have everything that is needed for testing uh, in that particular room. So that's going to be very important. So as you do your reservation form, you're going to tell us how many juniors, seniors, that you are testing, how many sophomores that you're testing. Sometimes schools overlook the sophomores. The sophomores, that is the population that will benefit the greatest from the ASVAB CEP program in the high schools because they are the ones that will be in the high school the longest. Because the whole concept of our program is to provide a tool to the students to help them to identify a future occupation or career, identify what skills are necessary to be successful in that occupation or career. Then, using the ASVAB test, we assess where their particular skills are at right now. Because, see, the ASVAB is not really a pass or fail test in the high schools. Every test, all 8 of those tests are very important. Each of those tests is going to provide a unique piece in that process of career exploration. So, um, when they actually uh, you filling that information out when the students get into those tests, the for example like the technical subjects, we already know that some of those questions to some of those students will look like they dropped down out of Mars somewhere. We already know that. We already know that some of the students have never come in contact with these particular skills. But at the same time, these skills are very important. That's why I tell students don't leave blanks. If you need to guess, then you guess. So it all comes together in the end process in the post-test interpretation session. So once you tell us how many in the general session, you're going to tell us how many students you're going to test in the special accommodation. That's section 4. Then section 5 of the reservation form, this is where you're going to break down and tell us where you want to test. For example, if you have the let's say a general session, you're going to test in the gym. You're going to place gym and you're going to tell me how many students you plan on testing in the gym. If you have 4 special accommodation rooms, or if you have 4 general rooms, you have to let me know how many students in each of those. Section 5, the number of students you testing, should match the numbers that you have in section 4. Also in section 5, it asks for a post-test interpretation date. Now, this year, starting this year, and this is in effect as we speak now, this year, every school that submit a reservation form for testing, if they want a post-test interpretation session, that is not an option. And the reason that is not an option is this. The ASVAB program in the high school is just like if you and I get on our computer and we go into a department store and we see this suit that we want. We say, oh man, that would look nice right there. I look good and this, and you order that suit. And then a few days later, the department store sends you a message that says your order is in. So you go down to the department store and the attendant comes out with a suit bag and you just open up the bag, and inside of that bag is only a jacket or only a pair of trousers or a skirt or something. And then you look at the attendant and say, I think that my order got mixed up. I ordered a whole suit. Only thing in there is a pair of trousers or a blouse or something to this effect. Same as it is with the ASVAB program. The ASVAB program is a two-phase program. You have the ASVAB test, and then you have the post-test interpretation. And so schools in the state of Indiana starting this year will give me a post-test interpretation date. The school has up to at least 60 days after their test date to conduct a facilitated post-test interpretation with the students that took that test. Now, right now, probably by the end of this month, I will start assessing all the schools that have tested in the fall. I will not test a school again until they have conducted their post-test interpretation with that fall group of students that have took the test. I'm not saying I won't test them. I just won't test them again until they complete that post-test interpretation. And lots of times a school might ask, well, Mr. Grammy, how you know? How would you know haven't done a post-test interpretation? Well, right now on my other screen, I have an analytic report for the state of Indiana. And it tells me where the testing, post-test interpretations are taking place at. Every one of your students, because this is for career exploration, every student that takes the Asvab test, they are given their own personal access code into a very powerful database. That student should never have to go to any other source to research anything pertaining to occupational careers. It's in that database. And that student is given their own personal access code into that database. So once you get to that point, your reservation form is finished. Then on that reservation form, all reservation form is sent to our ASVAB uh, mailbox. We generated at the beginning of this year, we generated a mailbox that all reservation forms, or you have specific questions or something like that, it goes to that mailbox. And the reason for that is because up until March of this year, I operated without a test coordinator for over 15 months. And some of you already remember those times because you be out there on that counselor talk. Y'all beat me up pretty good out there on that counselor talk. Can anyone get in touch with Mr. Granberry? That's because that I didn't have a test coordinator. I didn't have, it was, I was like the Lone Ranger. I would come in at 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, try to knock out as many emails and things or anything that was hot that I needed to take care of. And then I would be out there in the streets taking care of schools, get back at 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, early evening. Sometimes my email box will have 700 or 800 emails in it on a daily basis. So everything goes to that mailbox. And when it goes to that mailbox, then we have the test control officer, my test coordinators, all of those individuals, 3 or 4 eyes on that box. While I am at that point, some of you probably have communicated with Mr. Tacey. Mr. Tacey was my test coordinator. He arrived here, I think, in March. Well, this week is Mr. Tacey last week here at the MEPS. So any correspondence that you have been sending to Mr. Tacey, send those correspondence to the mailbox, or you can send those correspondence directly to me. So when you send in your reservation form, these are the 3 things that need to happen. I had a principal to send me an email day before yesterday, and in the email he stated, he said, Mr. Granberry, I just want to follow up to make sure that our school is still scheduled a test on tomorrow, which was yesterday. And I no, actually would have been today. And I took a look, and I called him and left him a voicemail, and he was not scheduled to test on today. He was actually scheduled to test on the 10th of November. This is what happens after you submit a reservation form for testing. You submit your reservation form. These three things must happen when you submit a reservation form. One, you submit that reservation form. Our test coordinator will process your reservation form. The first thing they're going to look at your reservation form is for completeness. Every bit of the information that we have on that form is for a specific purpose. Did you give us 3 dates? Did you select an option? Do you have a clear notation of how many students you want to test? Do you have a breakdown of your locations? And lastly, did you submit a post-test interpretation? Most of the time, if you have not submitted a post-test interpretation, we will not process that reservation form until you give us a post-test interpretation. Once that is completed, that goes into our system, and the system will establish a testing date for you. Many times, schools that have been doing this for a while, they already know before they break for the summer, they submit their test and reservation form for the fall. And we realize that you submit your reservation form early. In fact, about March or April, I will send emails out encouraging you to, hey, schedule early. And so once you is given a reservation testing date, we will send a confirmation to your school. Now make sure that if your point of contact change, make sure that you communicate that to us. Send it to the mailbox. This is a change. Because from that point on, all the communication that goes to your school is going to go to that person on that point of contact line. Even my master school list, my master school list will be updated with that particular person on that line. Now, another point is this. I believe that most of the schools have test coordinators or other individuals that work in those capacities. Make sure that I have in my master contact list the name of your school counselor. Your school counselor is our point of contact. If the test coordinator is going to be the person that handle the Asvab test, that's going to be fine. I will add another line with that test coordinator person on that particular line. But the counselor should always be in that communication chain. Now, you should receive a confirmation of your test date. This is what we have. We have you scheduled to test on this day, that day, so forth. After that, let's say you submit that reservation form to me in April for the fall. Once I place you in our system, you do not have to call our office and say, uh, "Are we still good?" Once I place you in the system, you can go ahead and do whatever you need to do, take care of other important things. But the ASVAB, we are tracking your school. And what's going to happen is this. Everything might be silent, but 30 days before your test date, you will get a reminder you will get a reminder from me that says this we have you scheduled for testing on this date. These are the numbers that we have. I need you to take a look at those numbers and give us an update of that process. And then after that 30-day reminder, about 5 working days before your test date, your assigned test administrator, she'll pick up that phone and dial your number. If that don't happen, then you contact our office. After you have made the initial contact with your test administrator, if you want to communicate with you, if they want to communicate with you by email or whatever, fine. So if those 3 things don't happen, you get a confirmation, you receive a 30-day reminder, and you receive a call from your test administrator. If those 3 things don't happen, then the chances are I do not have you on our radar for testing. Okay. So that's just a little bit about the testing overview process. I want to just take a few moments to talk about the most important reason that we test in the high schools, and that is the post-test interpretation process. Now, let me state this. Um, Whoever is your point of contact on that reservation form, um, they will automatically be nominated into the post-test interpretation proficiency training. Now, let me just state this about that post-test interpretation proficiency training. I went out on counselor talk I think it was uh, last year, and the counselors don't make something simple difficult. And what I mean by that is this: the post-test interpretation proficiency training, that is a really about 5 or 6 hour Moodle training. And the whole purpose of this training is to introduce you to the content of the Asvab Career Exploration Program occupational database. I asked I asked a colleague in the schools once, who responsibility is it in the school to provide career direction to their students? And they stated to me, the counselor. The counselors are the ones that are responsible for providing career directions in the schools to students. Now, I believe many of the students have college and career coaches. The counselors, college career uh, uh, personnel, test coordinator, all of those individuals should know what the content of that database is. And so I enrolled them in that particular process. Right now, we have over 600 and some counselors, administrators all across the state that is enrolled in the post-test interpretation proficiency training. Many of them have not completed that. I will be in contact with them real soon because again, if your school have tested before you break for Christmas, I fully expect that your school conducts a post-test interpretation, a facilitated post-test interpretation. That is not just passing out. Some schools not even giving students the students their result sheets. But the whole significance of the Asvab correction program consists of three components: the Asvab test, the FYI find your interest, and the Occupying, the occupational database. We have over 1,000 occupations associated to the interest inventory. So simply speaking, and then I'm gonna stop and entertain any questions that anyone have. Um, Once you take the ASVAB test, we administer in the school 8 tests. We do not administer that ninth test that is on that answer sheet. We administer the ASVAB test. It's a 3-hour test. It's a time test. Each test is a time test. The longest of any test is a 36-minute test. That's the arithmetic reasoning. The next longest test is a 24-minute test. That's the mathematic knowledge. All the other tests will either be 11-minute, 13-minute. We even have a 9-minute test. You have academic subjects and you have 3 technical subjects. Those technical subjects is very important, and if a school do not complete all 8 tests, and like I have some accommodations that do not complete all of the tests, you do not complete all 8 tests, then I would not offer special accommodation to your, I would not offer special accommodation to your school if they're not going to complete all the 8 tests, because you just really done wasted your time and wasted the valuable time of those students, because the test will now be invalidated. So after testing, the post-test interpretation is a 30 to 40-minute process. Most of our schools here in the state of Indiana are one-to-one schools, meaning that all your students probably have laptops, Chromebooks, accessibility to the internet. So only thing that the process interpretation consists simply of this: have the students to log in to the site www.asvalprogram.com. If you have not been in that site, www.asvalprogram.com, you can use this access code. I will be the access code that we're giving out to all the counselors, all the college coaches, and all of that. Capital CEP, the number 4, capital ME. And when you go in there, you will have to create your own account. And when you create your own account, you will have to take the interest inventory. Interest inventory is nothing new, based upon the Holland Code, Dr. Holland, the Holland codes, proven system. And once you get those Holland codes, first of all, our occupational database is hidden to anyone that do not have an access code. So once those students get their top 1, 2, or 3 interest codes, we have over 1,000 occupations associated to those codes. And anything that student need to know about that particular occupation, our system will even let you know what type of degrees or certification people have in that particular occupation. They'll be able to see a map of the United States. You plan on moving across the country, move a cursor. It'll tell you how much money these people make in their occupation, everything that you need to know. And more importantly, there's a little section in there working with Department of Labor and the professional in the occupation called the skills importance rating. And those skills importance rating, that's where the ASVAB tests come in, because we take those 8 tests, collapse those 8 tests into 3 scores called their correction scores. Verbal skills, that's the math, that's the paragraph comprehension, word knowledge. Their math skills, arithmetic, reasoning, mathematical knowledge. Then there's science and technical skills, general science, electronics. Um, the other 2 escape me, but They make up the science and technical skills. And so that database let that student know which of those skills are important to be successful in those particular occupations. Last thing I want to give you is my telephone number, and later on, the individuals that set up this here meeting, they can provide you with my email address, or you can just call me directly. If you're in the state of Indiana, you probably have my email address. You probably have my phone number.
We'll
My
add it
work
to
phone
the
number is
email we send to. Yeah.
okay. So you should have all that information. And when all else fail, you send me an email. And let me give you another phone number. That's going to be my personal cell phone. Okay. And many of you use my personal cell phone. I just asked if you call my personal cell, I don't pick up. You make sure you leave me a voicemail, because by time I would say about 20 seconds after I receive a phone call and I don't receive a voicemail, that number probably is going to end up on my block list. So my personal cell, 317 414 7148. So do not hesitate to use that particular number, because I am on the road often. But what I can say is if you call me on my personal cell, you will get a response. I operate from the principle, the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the oil.
Mhm.
So I hope I have shared some things. There are many things that I could share, but I hope I have shared some things with you um, that is helpful. The
Yeah. Thank you so
ASVAB,
much.
the ASVAB is a seamless program, okay? And my mission is to assist you to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish as far as the implementation of the ASVAB in your school.
I do have one question. We only have about 1 minute. 1 minute if we log off at 1. So, Mr. Tacey's last week is this week. Will you be
Yes,
getting, is somebody else coming on board, and will we get that person's email address when and if they do?
I actually have two test coordinators, and that's Miss Keeler. Um, most of you should have, if you have any correspondence from me, and I will send that information out probably this week or no later than the first of next week, notifying everyone that Mr. Taste is no longer there. Miss Keeler will be still, right now, she won't be back until the 15th of this month. Uh, but she will still be in place. Uh, that mailbox that we have, you utilize that mailbox because our test control officer, Miss Keeler, myself, Mr. Tate, we all have visibility of that particular box.
Perfect. Thank you so much for all of the information. I have like so many notes that I wrote down. So things that I've learned today. Um, and for those of you on the call, thank you so much for joining today. We will send the recording in an email later this week. We have our big event at Cell is tomorrow night. So that email may come out late in the week, if not early in next week. So if you want to share that with colleagues who weren't able to join, then that would be wonderful. And I'll see some of you next week, Tuesday at noon. So we will log off and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Granberry. I appreciate it.